So we'll go over the main mechanism of how an aircraft engine works and also the four main types of engines. So starting with the turbojet engine, which is most common in fighter jets like the SR-71 and other military aircraft. So there's four main sections. And the first is the intake, which is where the incoming air is captured through the inlet. Next is the compression stage, where the air is squeezed. So there are multiple sets of rotating blades here and stationary blades that increases the air pressure by forcing the air through smaller and smaller spaces, which makes the air much hotter and denser and more efficient for fuel combustion. Next is combustion, where the high pressure air is mixed with fuel by fuel injectors and ignited, similar to a spark plug in the piston engines in a gas car. So the fuel air mixture then expands really quickly, which forces the high pressure gases to drive the turbine, which is actually linked to the rotating blades in the compressor through the shaft. So some military jets have afterburners after the stage, which basically add like extra fuel to produce additional thrust. But this is only for specific scenarios like flight maneuvers or takeoff from an aircraft carrier, since it wastes a lot of fuel. And finally, the exhaust stage, the hot gases are expelled at high speed to produce thrust. So if there's a big enough change in momentum from the inlet air to the exhaust, that's what's producing the thrust. And this is mainly found for subsonic to supersonic planes, as we said before, and it's pretty efficient at high speeds. Similarly, the turbofan engine works on the same principles, and this is the type of engine that people are most familiar with. Every time you fly on a plane on a commercial airline, these are the engines that you see under the wings. So to put it simply, these engines are basically turbojet engines like we just saw before, but with a much larger fan at the front that pushes a huge volume of air called bypass air backwards to generate most of the thrust. So this diagram shows it a lot better, but this whole midsection here is you can see how that's pretty much this turbojet engine here with a smaller fan. And we have an addition of this bigger fan, which captures most of the intake air from the surrounding volume. So all of this here is intake air that gets bypassed. And so 80 to 90% of the thrust comes from just the fan, and a small portion of the air actually enters the core stage into here, the turbojet. This cross section also kind of shows what we discussed before with the stator and rotating blades in the compressor stage. So there's different sets of blades here, which alternate between rotating and stationary. And the exact geometry of these blades, if you zoom in here, it's kind of like an airfoil. And they alternate so that the air travels and bounces around into smaller and smaller spaces until it gets compressed. So the turbofan engine works on the same principles. The big fan in the front, and just how the exhaust there in the turbojet example drove the turbine blades, which in turn drove the compressor blades. That's this part here. The turbine here is connected on this shaft, which rotates, and it rotates the compressor blades. Same concept here, except it's also mechanically fastened to the fan itself, and it rotates not just the compressor but also the fan. So this is for mainly found in like commercial jets, commercial airlines, things like that. Next, we're getting into highly specialized aircraft traveling at higher Mach numbers, and the first is the ramjet. So just to recap, the turbojet and turbofan needed moving parts in the compressor, which was powered by a turbine to compress the air before combustion. But once we're looking at speeds past like Mach 2, the air speed is high enough where we don't need any moving parts in the engine itself. Instead of using a compressor, the air is compressed by the aircraft's speed in and of itself as it slows down inside the inlet area to subsonic speeds. So following this logic, the ramjet, of course, doesn't work when the aircraft is stationary and is only efficient at high speeds. So in this case, you can see here, there's no moving parts here. There's no turbine here. There's no compressor here. The aircraft, and I guess the air itself, is traveling at a relative velocity that's high enough where it's compressed in the inlet. So you don't need a set of blades to compress it. So finally, the scramjet is a more advanced version of the ramjet designed for hypersonic speeds. Like the ramjet, there's no moving parts needed, but the air is now compressed without slowing down to subsonic speeds. So in this case, before, the air coming in the inlet is slowed down significantly to subsonic speeds. But for the scramjet, when the aircraft is traveling at Mach 5 to 10 plus, so it turns out that pushing past Mach 5 or 6 for a ramjet will increase the temperature and pressure of the air a bit too much for proper combustion. So the scramjet only slows down the air marginally when it's in the inlet, leaving it at supersonic speeds. Other than that, it's pretty much similar mechanically to the ramjet. And you can see the different stages here. Even though it's a simpler model, the stages all follow the same principle, even with the turbofan and turbojet, where you have incoming air, compression, combustion, and exhaust. And these are all the air breathing, these are mainly the air breathing engines on aircraft.